Thank you. Thank you so much, Juliana. And it's a real privilege to welcome you to this webinar today on diagnosing gender diversity and inclusion in water and sanitation utilities. As Juliana has mentioned, I'm the head of GWOPA based in Bonn. It's my more or less third week in this position, so I'm a new arrival in heading this important global program, and really looking forward to listening today, learning together with all of you about the different tools that are going to be presented. As I think I would believe that I can see we're over 50 participants, which is great. Probably not necessary for this group to underscore how significant it is for us to all, look at how we can enhance gender responsiveness and diversity in the work that we're doing on water. But what is really, I find, especially striking and important with the event today, and I'm sure that's why you're joining us as well, is that it's looking specifically at tools and not just on sort of the why, but really on how to how do we really do this in practice. So I really want to commend the organizers for putting together such a practical program, and I hope that everybody will be enjoying and learning and following up from the many examples that we will have with us. My job is an easy one. I just want to really welcome you. I also want to recognize the partners, the co-organizers of this event that we're working with, the Institution for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology in Sydney. We very much appreciate the partnership with you, and also the African Water Association. And also, of course, to recognize that the event is supported by the International Water Association. So many thanks for making this possible. And really, let's hope that this is a very useful and practical exchange. I'm not going to take more time. I know that we have a rich program and we want to get into it. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Juliana Ferraro. Many of you probably already know her, but just to highlight that she's been in the water sector for a long time, 17 years, and I think you're in very good hands with her guidance through this afternoon. Juliana is a senior consultant with GWOPA, and we're really very grateful to have you with us in our team and to lead this work that we're doing on gender. So over to you, Juliana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Osa, and warm welcome again to all today's attendees. Once again, I would like to start with some housekeeping announcement. So I invite all attendees to mute their microphones and turn off their cameras. Then a very important announcement is that you can feel free to post your questions in the chat. So your questions will be either answered directly by the speakers in the chat, or will be answered during the final Q&A. And lastly, I'd like to inform you that the webinar is being recorded. So now, the agenda of today is very rich, but before we dive right in, I would like to start by asking the audience some questions via a very simple poll. So let me just launch the poll. So firstly, we would like to know if you have been implementing activities related to the diagnosis of gender diversity and inclusion in your water and sanitation utility. So this is a simple yes or no question. Then the second question is if gender diversity and inclusion related goals are part of your corporate action plans. Again, a yes or no answer. And finally, a third question, which is dealing with the tools, the objective of the workshop today. So are you familiar with these tools? We have a multiple choice with three of the tools that you will hear of today. So Equal Aqua's HR survey, Wash Alliance International or Simavi's Organizational Inclusion Assessment Tool, and USAID's Rapid Organizational Assessment Tool. You can also say other or none. So I see that we have a lot of answers coming in. I see that people are still voting, so allow 1 minute for more answers to come in. At the moment, in this very moment, we have 71 participants online and 46 managed to answer, just to give you a rough ratio of the answers that you see on your screen. So we can see that the room is quite split. The majority actually are implementing GDI activities within their water utilities. And again, the great majority have this component included in their corporate action plans. It's also interesting to see that many of you already have experience with the tools that we are going to be discussing today. But it's also nice to see that the ratio of the participants, about 39%, does not have experience with these tools. So I hope that you will benefit from this webinar. So I will now stop the sharing this and move on with the agenda. So as mentioned before, the agenda of today is very rich and comprises presentations from experts from around the world. The first introductory presentation will be given by Avni Kumar from the University of Technology, Sydney. Then we will have 3 blocks, each related to a different tool or methodology. The first one relates to the tools developed under USAID's Engendering Industries program, with an introductory presentation given by Kirsten Klopper and 2 presentations on experiences given by Dr. Letitia Kuhn and Faustina Boaci. Then the second block relates to the approach used by AfWA of the World Bank, with a broad presentation given by Camila Galesa, followed by a practitioner's experience presented by Lucy Cárdenas. Then the last group of presentations relates to the organizational inclusion assessment tool developed by Simavi, and the tool will be presented by Sara Harari, and the experience will be shared by Hadi Turen. We will conclude with the webinar with the Q&A facilitated by Sika Radilova. And again, looking at the Q&A, a reminder for you to post your questions in the chat. So without further ado, let's dive right in with the first presentation. So the first presenter is Avni Kumar. She is a senior research consultant at the Institute for Sustainable Futures in Sydney, where she specializes in WASH with a cross-cutting focus on equality and inclusion. She has a background in development economics and has worked in various capacities with government, society, civil society, private sector, and multilateral organizations. Since it is past 11 o'clock right now in Sydney, I kindly provided a pre-recorded presentation. The title of her presentation is Gender Equality and Inclusion in Water and Sanitation Workplaces, Recent Research and the Framework to Support Action.
A very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Avni Kumar, and I'm currently based in Sydney, Australia, where I work as a researcher in water and sanitation at the Institute for Sustainable Futures, University of Technology, Sydney. This project is a collaborative effort by my colleagues Melita Grant and Juliet Willits, as well as the various partner organizations and the Australian government's Water for Women Fund, who were instrumental in shaping this research. So why is it important to have diversity in the water and sanitation workforce? Research shows that women are largely underrepresented in this sector. This is contradictory to the fact that in many countries and communities, women are the ones who manage household water, having intimate knowledge of water quality and quantity issues. Further, with respect to sanitation as well, women and girls are often the most adversely affected when clean and safe sanitation facilities are not available to them. Therefore, when considering gender equality and social inclusion in water and sanitation, we need to turn the mirror and look at the people who are managing these systems, as well as the institutions that shape and deliver WASH services. We also need to transform these institutions so that they walk the talk of equality and inclusion. Everyone has a responsibility to make change and to ensure we have a diverse workforce which serves everyone in the community, leaving no one behind. In order to support water and sanitation organizations, we introduce the following framework, which is adapted from the World Bank Equal AfWA initiative. It shows the various stages of an individual's career cycle, starting from attracting a diverse workforce, and enables thinking about the various barriers that can exist at each stage of recruitment, retention, and advancement, and how can these be addressed. Before addressing any of these, however, it is useful to start with a diagnosis, which can be a self-assessment to understand the current norms, practices, and dynamics within an organization. The diagnosis phase may include collecting and managing data and conducting an analysis or self-assessment to measure the participation of women and people from marginalized groups at the organizational level. Separation data, for example, analysis of exit interview testimonies and percentage of women and people with marginalized groups leaving the organization are also good indicators on how inclusive an organization is. Every workplace has a different context, and a diagnosis can help to identify an organization's respective starting point. A diagnosis can also be a self-reflection, helping an organization to assess, analyze, and benchmark themselves against the core gender and social inclusion issues and understand the potential causes of the same. It is important to note here that diagnosis is not a one-off exercise, but an assessment that should be repeated periodically. Moreover, every workplace has a different starting point, and this stage of diagnosis can help you to identify where to start in your respective context. There are a number of tools and actions that can support an organization to do a diagnosis of the gender and social dynamics within their workplace. This includes audits, pay gap assessments, scorecards, and many more. Some tools, such as the World Bank Equal AfWA's Gender Survey, comprises of collecting objective data and might be more useful for utilities starting their journey of diversity and inclusion, as it requires less effort, whereas other tools like the International Labour Organization's Gender Audit is a more intensive process covering staff perceptions, intangible collective behavior and assumptions within an organization, and this might be suited for utilities which are looking for a more deeper understanding of their systems and decision-making processes. The second pillar, called attraction in our framework, talks about understanding the factors that influence the people an organization attracts to its workforce and the barriers that exist for diverse applicants. This knowledge can encourage more women and girls to consider careers in the water and sanitation sector, and can also enable water and sanitation utilities to strategically attract diverse talent, including a greater diversity of disciplines to this sector. There are a range of tools available to promote this. For example, the Water Authority of Fiji has a 2-day outreach program targeting secondary school students. Secondly, a USAID program working with utilities has a Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, which is aimed to encourage and inspire girls about their future career prospects in the water sector. Continued efforts to attract diverse talent will be inadequate unless there are enough roles available and recruitment policies and processes are conducive to hiring more women in all their diversity. The third pillar that looks at eliminating such discrimination in hiring processes by understanding the various bottlenecks that women tend to encounter at this phase, such as prejudiced interview questions, gender-biased language in job advertisements, etc., and how to overcome the same. Tools to foster inclusive hiring policies range from Unity Water Australia, who have a diversity of hire initiative that tracks candidate diversity throughout the recruitment process, and ensuring job advertisements reflect diverse demographics and diverse interview panels. Other examples include rephrasing job advertisements by using tools such as Textio and Gender Decoder, which can help to identify subtle bias in job advertisements. Coming to retaining a diverse workforce, research shows that women are more likely to leave the workforce at a higher rate than men, including in water and sanitation utilities. Moreover, women's tenures are observed to be much shorter than men on average, and this is particularly striking in technical positions such as engineers and managers. Reasons include, but are not limited to, factors such as inflexible work arrangements that can conflict with care responsibilities, violence or harassment at work, feelings of isolation in a male-dominated work environment, discriminatory laws related to maternity leave, and lack of basic facilities such as hygienic and menstrual-friendly toilets, and many more. This stage encourages us to think about how organizations can be supported to retain female and diverse talent. This can range from formal policies supporting family-friendly workplaces, fair wages, accessible facilities, to changing informal dynamics and the unconscious and often conscious bias that shapes who are the decision makers in the organizations, who has voice and influence, and whether there is support and acceptance of diverse leadership styles. The next pillar discusses the various barriers that accompany career advancement, which is often hindered by various factors, the most common ones being societal norms and perceptions. And often these social norms are so deeply ingrained that they affect women's own perceptions about their capabilities. At times, the systems and structures at the workplace are also not conducive to supporting women in senior roles. Examples of positive efforts in this regard include the International Water Association's Women in Water Award, which acknowledges and celebrates women leaders working in the field of water. Secondly, Women in Water Leadership Circle by the World Bank is a leadership program for female decision makers in Kenyan water service providers. And lastly, the framework considers an overarching stage of societal expectations, which have a deep influence on workplace dynamics. This invisible realm penetrates organizational culture and influences decision-making subtly and in a generally socially accepted way. Some examples to overcome these include working with men as allies or agents of change, partnering with community groups to draw on their experience of working in this space, etc. This guidance document is accompanied by an interactive database of over 180 initiatives from across the world, drawn from water and sanitation utilities, government departments, civil society organizations, and the private sector. It includes details of many more actionable ideas and tools that you can use to promote equality and inclusion in your organization. It also has further details of some of the examples that I spoke about in my presentation today. Therefore, I would really encourage you to have a look at the QR code on the slide. Thank you very much for your attention, and feel free to reach out to me on the email ID on the screen if you have any questions or any feedback on the material that I shared today. Thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
So our next speaker is Kirsten GWOPA. Kirsten is the change management coach with USAID's Engendering Industries program. She's one of several coaches working in male-dominated industries to promote gender equality. Her partners in the energy and water and sanitation sector are as far afield as Mongolia, Ukraine, and Moldova, and closer to her home in Uganda, Benin, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. Kirsten, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Juliana. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you what the Engendering Industries program has been doing for the past 4 to 5 years. So what I want to, in the next slide, just cover with you in the next 10 minutes. Let's just see if we can get to the next slide. Thanks. It's just to tell you briefly about our program. I want to spend some time telling you about the diagnostic tools that we use to inform the development of any gender strategy with our partners. And then lastly, I'll give you some examples so that you can see how we use the evidence that we gather. Let's go to the next slide. So a little bit about the program. Our program is based on, among other things, three key pillars. So the one is the best practices framework, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. Then we offer an intensive 2-year and an accelerated 1-year program. And in addition to that, coaching to support the partners that we work with to develop appropriate gender strategies for their organizations. And we work with a large backup team to do this work. So it's, as Juliana mentioned, several change management coaches, gender and policy advisors, communication specialists, and we have a monitoring, evaluation, and learning team who collect the data based on the diagnostic tools we use. They conduct the analysis and produce the reports, which I'll show you a little later in my presentation. And then the outcomes on the right-hand side that you see highlight what outcomes the program works to achieve. Next slide. So this is just to show you a little bit of our 2-year intensive program where we operate in 27 countries. You can see in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. It's included 4 different cohorts of participants from 41 different utilities, mainly in the energy sector. But what you see in blue, and you might not have enough time to see it, but you can see it later, are our partners who are in water and sanitation utilities. Next. Since introducing the accelerated program in 2021, where we use both a direct face-to-face and an indirect method, which is online and through partners, we've seen 86 companies from 41 countries participate in the training and receive between 6 to 12 months of coaching to support the development and implementation of their gender equality action plans. So let's move on to the approach of our program. If we can go to the next and the next slide. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our approach. So I mentioned that we use a best practices framework to assist our partners to develop their gender strategies. And the framework is based on the employee life cycle, and it explains what best practices a company can apply at every stage in the life cycle in order to become more gender equal. So again, on the left-hand side, you can see in the blue inner circle each stage, and outside what we would call the organizational enablers to support gender equality. So for those of you who are not in HR, when we talk about the employee life cycle, think of it as being the journey of an employee within your utility from the point, so where it is attraction and talent outreach, where they first know about you, then to where they're interviewed, go through a selection, an interview and selection process, all the way through to the cycle to the separation and retirement. So at every stage of the journey, there are practices that you can use to ensure that your utility or your company is gender equal throughout. So let me give you an example. If you want to attract more young women into your utility, the framework of what practices to cast your wider so that more young women are aware of a gender action plan. We use a range of diagnostic tools to identify where the gaps and the opportunities are for improving gender data, and we disaggregate it not only by gender, but where employees are located at what level and what their technical skill is. We do an analysis of policy to look at the extent to which policies integrate gender equality policies and practices. And to support the case for gender equality, we look at the KPIs, the key performance indicators, exists or not, right? Whether the policy exists, whether it's in draft form, whether it's been perhaps approved, but it hasn't been fully implemented, or whether the policy has been approved and implemented. So where that helps us is it lets us know, or it lets a utility know where the policy gaps are, what it might need to do to fully implement. One can design a policy, but it's also about implementation. And then on the right-hand side, we do a participant self-assessment at the outset of the accelerated program. And it's a way for a participant to gauge the extent to which they understand gender equality issues. And again, if you're able to see the screen, you can have a look at the two examples that I've given there. The one might be, I can confidently explain gender-related concepts to a colleague. Or I have a clear vision of what a gender equal organization is and what it looks like. So as you see, it's based on their own assessment of themselves. And the idea is that at the end of the program, we then invite themselves to reassess themselves. So it provides a very important learning process. So the conclusion at the end of the accelerated program might be, well, I thought I knew gender-related concepts, but now I've learned, for example, the difference between, say, sex and gender. Or now I understand, I thought I knew, but now I understand even better what a gender equal organization looks like. So let's move on and look at some slides that illustrate what the outcome of a rapid organizational assessment looks like. So if we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Juliana. So one of the things that we do in the rapid organizational assessment is a staff composition. And these are based on companies that we actually work with. For this company, you can see that the number of females in leadership is low. If you look at executive managers, 25%, managers and supervisors, only 38%. And you can also see that the number of females in technical and engineering positions is low. So only 17% of engineers are female, and of those females, only 38% are in technical positions. So this company might reach the conclusion that if they wanted greater gender balance, they might want to focus on developing female senior professionals, where you can see there are 28% of women who have more than 10 years experience. They might want to look at how to promote some of the managers and supervisors so that they're eligible for promotion. So that gives you an example of how one would analyze the staff composition data. The next slide also looks at a different company. And in this example, what you can see is that although 60% of executive managers are female, if you look at the graph, the proportion of women at higher levels as board members and at lower levels is not equal. And this explains on the right-hand side why their gender parity score is only 0.2. So when we talk about gender parity, gender balance at different levels and across different divisions, where one would be the ideal. Additionally, what you can see from the comment at the bottom of the slide is that women are underrepresented among engineers and technicians. So it's not surprising to see that in fact they're only implementing 29% of best practices, if you look on the right-hand side. So let's have a look at a best practice analysis or assessment outcome in the next slide. So this is an example of the output of a rather more in-depth best practices assessment for a different company, and it shows the different stages of the employee life cycle and where they're underperforming. So in this particular company, overall, they were only implementing 20% of best practices with a particular weighting. So let's have a look. If, for example, like the previous company, they wanted to recruit more female technicians or engineers, it's evident that one area they could focus in is attraction and talent outreach. They're only implementing 11% of best practices, and their recruitment and hiring there are gaps and opportunities there to improve at only 19%. If they wanted to focus, on the other hand, on growing female leadership, if you look at number 5, they could focus on talent and leadership developments. They're only implementing 13% of best practices there. And if you look at number 7, succession planning and promotion, the best practices framework provides guidelines on what best practices they could implement to achieve greater gender parity or balance. Juliana, yes. Can I continue?
I'm sorry, but if you could wrap up just in the interest of time. I know it's super interesting, but...
Okay, yeah. So let's flip to the next slide. So in the next slide, you'll see the policy assessment when you get it. In the following slide, so again, it tells you what policies they are using or not. In the next slide, when we coach our partners, we work with the Gender Strategy Toolkit developed by the Workplace Gender Equality Agency of the Australian Government. And it's useful for utilities to be able to identify where they are in their journey to gender equality. In the next slide, I provide the links, and so you'll get that when you receive the presentation. And lastly, I just wanted to share a photograph of a water laboratory of one of our partners in the water and sanitation sector in Benin, where they're demonstrating new quality assurance technology. So thank you for your attention, and I welcome any questions that you may ask. Thank you, Juliana.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. It's very interesting what you presented, and I deeply apologize for interrupting you. Thank you. So our next speaker is Dr. Letitia Akun, and she will now reflect on AfWA's experiences in gender tools. Letitia is currently the gender specialist of AfWA. She has experience working with various development partners in the water sector, such as the European Union, USAID, World Bank, and with government agencies and departments. She has over 20 years experience, and she holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Ghana. So Letitia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gianna. And thank you, Kirsten, for setting the pace so it makes my work easier. So as she said, I'm going to share AfWA's experience in the gender tools, especially with reference to the engendering industries tool, which is funded by USAID. Next. Yeah, so I'll talk briefly about AfWA and what we do, the gender mainstreaming agenda that we want to take up, the gaps that we identified after using the tool by the engendering industry, and also the lessons that we have learned. Next, please. Yeah, so for the background of AfWA, I would say that the African Water Association, which is AfWA, is a professional association, and it brings together institutions, companies, operators, and key professionals in the water and sanitation and environment sector in Africa. And our vision is to be acknowledged as the leader in capacity building of water and sanitation stakeholders in Africa. The problem, an evaluation was done, and then the problem identified was that there was low representation of women in the governance of AfWA at all levels. So our aim is to make AfWA a gender-sensitive organization with increased women participation in decision-making at all levels within AfWA. Next, please. Yeah, so we embarked upon the mainstreaming agenda, gender mainstreaming agenda. And first, we engaged members of our board. We had some kind of a webinar, and because it was the COVID time, to get their buy-in and for their support. Later, we did a capacity building for gender focal persons on gender, and this was done by the Engendering Industries Program, USAID. After which, during which process we conducted the rapid organizational assessments using the employee life cycle tool, as Kirsten has described. And then at the end of the day, we developed, when we came up with the results, we were able to use that, identify the gaps, and then develop the Gender Equality Action Plan. Next, please. Yeah, so when we implemented using all the processes that she has already enumerated, under the staff composition, the analysis showed that we have few women in leadership. Only 39% of our staff were at women staff were at managerial level, and then 40% at senior professionals. And then we didn't have any female technician, no engineer or a technician, a woman in AfWA. For best practices, we were not doing well when it came to talent and leadership development, onboarding and training, attraction and outreach. And then when it came to company policies, a significant opportunity was there to integrate gender into AfWA policies, but we scored only 2 out of the 10 policies that we were supposed to get gender mainstream into. Next, please. Yeah, so out of the, from the results, identifying the gap, then we came up with a gender equality action plan. And this is what we had planned. We had for the talents and leadership, we're hoping that 30%, there will be 30% increase in female representation at various levels of governance within AfWA by 2027. And the actions were to engage more on the board, because our board presently is all male dominated. So we will start from there. And then for the company policies, we identified 3 major policies that we thought we could work on by 2023, and they included a gender equality and social inclusion policy, the equal employment opportunity policy, and the salary equality policy. Presently, we have reviewed our HR manual to include gender perspective, and also we are in the process of developing a salary grade. And presently we always revise our job adverts to be gender sensitive. So any advert that goes out of the AfWA is screened with gender lens to ensure that it is not biased. Next, please. On the onboarding and training, we were also looking at trainings and coaching programs being held at least twice a year for 50% of AfWA members. We have a membership of over 50 utilities. So that's what we hope to do. And also on the attraction and outreach, we hope to achieve 20% increase in the recruitment of female in the sector. And this we are going to do by conducting recruitment fairs in schools, secondary schools and universities to attract the young girls on board, create mentorship programs for staff and also at the school level. Next, please. Then so far, we've been able to, with the help of the engendering program, incorporated gender responsiveness into our statutory bylaws. We now have the buy-in of the board to go ahead with the gender mainstreaming across all our members. And we also have conducted a rapid organizational assessment and then built capacity of staff, which is still ongoing on gender concepts. Next, please. Yeah, so the challenges. The major challenge was identifying one tool that will be suitable for all and address all issues regarding what the utilities, like we are working with the water wash sector. So we had to do a combination of a lot of tools to be able to get what we needed. And then we also had challenge with analysis. Though the USAID tool is open access, the means of analysis is not available to the public. So that was also a big challenge. We had to come up with our own innovation. And then the lessons learned is that we were able to take cue from other tools. So we use the Engendering Industries Program Employee Life Cycle. We use the ILO and then the UNDP to gender tools. The way forward, we hope to analyze the rapid gender assessment among AfWA members. We have launched the survey and we are still waiting for a response from our members. When we get a sizable data, we hope to start the analysis and form gender committees so that they can roll it out at their utility level. Next, please. Yeah, so I think I'm done. And thank you so much for your attention. If you need more information, you can contact me by my phone number, and also you can visit our website, www.afwa.hq.org. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Leticia, for sharing your experience. The next speaker and the last testimony on the experiences with USAID tool comes from Ghana. Faustina Boachi is the Chief Manager of Ghana Water Company Limited, Low-Income Customer Support Department. She is responsible for fostering inclusive water service delivery, in which special attention is paid to serving low-income urban communities. Faustina, the floor is yours.
Thanks. In this presentation, I will discuss how Ghana Water has used the engendering industry's diagnostic tool to support the identification of gender equality gaps in our utility, and how this has heightened understanding of the key barriers and bottlenecks that women face in the workplace, and has helped us to identify interventions that can be put in place to increase gender diversity in our workforce. So I will focus on the diagnostic stage in this presentation. To ensure a fairer and inclusive diagnosis, diverse voices were involved in undertaking the rapid organizational assessment. We received input from staff in multiple departments at various levels, ensuring that women and decision makers were included. I also want to acknowledge the collaboration from USAID's innovative engendering industries program approach. Kirsten is here, and I want to thank her for the support that they gave us to sign us onto their program for us to do a diagnosis of gender equality in Ghana Water. So you will find that my presentation will dovetail more into what Kirsten shared. Great. So a deeper dive, GWCL is currently operating 13 regional offices, 3 special units, and 100 district offices. With a staff strength of over 5,000, we disaggregated staff composition by sex and found out that males account for 81% of staff, whilst females are 19%. Whichever way you look at it, you will find that the underlying trend is clear, that the percentage of female workers is considerably lower than that of men. You find that it is just fewer than 1 in 5, as you can see on the screen. Great. A deeper dive into the data will also reveal that only 17% of GWCL staff are in executive positions, 17% in managerial and supervisory roles, and 22% in executive, and 22% in senior professional roles. You will observe that the number of women in executive and managerial roles are the same, but then they are higher at the entry-level senior professional role. And I want to find out if this scenario is familiar with your own utility or organization. So Ghana Water also used the employee life cycle as a diagnostic entry tool to help us effect long-lasting and impactful change within our workforce. I always say that this tool is akin to a doctor asking a range of questions. And this enabled us to narrow down and identify key gender equity gaps, from attraction and talent outreach to separation and retirement, The employee life cycle served as a guide to identify gender equity practices throughout our organization. And then the scoring outcomes was also used as a checklist and focus on developing goals and objectives in the areas where we wanted to make improvement. I will advise that to score your organization, you will need to gather evidence so that you can make informed decisions. And you find on the screen that Ghana Water scored 96 against a total score of 188 in the 12 gender best practice areas. Our overall score gave us a sense of how our utility was performing across gender equality broadly. But then focusing on the overall score will not give you enough insight to build your gender action plan. So we focused more on the individual scores in the best practice areas to know where to focus attention. Ghana Water scored 25 on tailored policies that address specific gender equality needs of our utilities. These policies were important building blocks that helped us to set the tone, to track progress, demonstrate leadership commitments, and enable our utility to achieve gender equality. And in assessing the policies, it helped us to diagnose and identify best practice areas to focus on promoting gender equality within our organization. My slides are not moving, so I'll just speak. Great. So based on the diagnosis, we have identified policy gaps in non-discriminatory and equal employment opportunity. We have identified gaps in gender policy, as well as sexual harassment and sexual exploitation. And the top 3 best practices and policies that we need to improve as an organization is to take targeted, tangible, and strategic action, which is grounded in the assessment, is to help us increase gender equality in our utility, are in talent and leadership development, recruitment and hiring, and succession planning and promotion. These are our top 3 priorities. So to conclude, I will say that each of us has an important role to play in making gender equality a reality. And I look forward to joining forces on the GWOPA program to advance this important work around the globe. I hope this presentation inspires dialogue at your own utility to overcome fears related to gender equality and move to start your own diagnosis. Let us become proactive allies and inspire others to start diagnosing gender equality within our various utilities. Thank you for being on this journey with us, and we look forward to seeing the great change that we can all help to bring to the world. Thank you very much. I am still available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faustina. I ask all the participants to ask any question they may have for Faustina in the chat. So we move on with the second block of presentations, those related to Equal AfWA. The next speaker is Camila Galeza. Camila is a social development specialist with the Water Global Practice at the World Bank Group, where she supports deepening social inclusion in water lending operations and global knowledge efforts through capacity building, operational support, research, and knowledge management. Camila leads Equal AfWA, a global platform for promoting female employment in water institutions. Camila, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Thank you, colleagues. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be among such great presenters and learn so much from you. What will this presentation cover today? I'll give you some background about our work on gender diversity in water and about Equal AfWA platform. I'll share diagnostic tools and insights from the updated Women in Water database. And finally, I'll describe how to join Equal AfWA benchmarking exercise and what are the benefits you can expect. So this work began with the publication of the Women in Water Utilities Breaking Barriers report, which was a mixed methods research that explored barriers and promising approaches in promoting female participation in the sector. Data from 64 water and sanitation utilities and numerous interviews and focus group discussions showed that women were starkly underrepresented in the sector and that a range of barriers repeated in most surveyed countries. The findings from the report gave rise to Equal AfWA, which you can see on the next slide, a global platform created with a number of partners to narrow gender gaps in employment in water. Equal AfWA partners include water utilities, private sector companies, international organizations, NGOs, and academia, and some of them are here today. Currently, there are 19 official partners, mostly from water and sanitation sector, and new partnerships are being formed with water resources, river basin organizations, and irrigation agencies. On the next slide, you can see that our work can be divided into three broad categories. The platform itself, so Equal AfWA partners form a community of practice. We have regular meetings, training opportunities, and knowledge exchanges. Operational support with tools and technical support provided to water and sanitation institutions. And evidence and benchmarking. So HR surveys and scorecards, comprehensive benchmark database, documenting good practices and effective interventions. And this is the focus of today's presentation. So on the next slide, you can see that for the report, we developed this framework, which was presented earlier, looking systematically at 4 stages of employee life cycle. And we can highlight barriers for gender diversity in utilities, but also show that we can attract more women to the sector, recruit them, retain employees, and promote participation of women in decision-making roles. But as mentioned earlier, and I think everyone agrees here, is the first step is to diagnose the challenge. And for that, we need tools. So on the next slide, I'll show how Equal AfWA platform developed several diagnostic tools, but our key instrument for creating a baseline on gender diversity is the HR survey. So first, HR surveys are distributed to water utilities, and the surveys include questions around general HR information, so total number of employees, disaggregated by sex, total number of female managers or engineers, policies and programs, so family-friendly arrangements such as flexible work, maternity leave, etc. Training opportunities and work environment. So are there separate toilets for men and women? Is childcare provided or supported? Are there lactation rooms and so on? And once this information is received, our team processes the data and generates a confidential scorecard, which is sent directly to utility. And it's a benchmarking tool that helps utilities measure progress against previous data, if they repeat it, and regional and global averages. Separately, the survey data is aggregated by region and entered into a global database, which is publicly available, and we provided a link in the chat with thanks to Fernando. So on the next slide, you'll see that this Women in Water database is now the largest database of its kind and has become a global benchmark mechanism for gender in water institutions. It was first launched in December 2020, and the database was updated last month with an expanded data set from 164 utilities from 45 countries. Is available in Spanish and French, contains new interactive features and categories, and is designed to be accessible for persons with disabilities. So on the following slide, what do we know about women in water jobs, in water utilities? So in the next few slides, you will see some excerpts, and here's a preview from the database. Well, unsurprisingly, women continue to be underrepresented in the sector. For every 5 employees in an average utility, only 1 is female, and the same is true for engineers and managers. So though averages vary by region and even within countries, the fact is the sector has a long way to go before gender parity is reached. But let's take a closer look at the share of engineers. We see stark differences between regions. Regional averages for East Asia and the Pacific and Middle East and North Africa are similar to the global average. Europe and Central Asia has the highest regional average. Why it matters? Participating utilities can use this data to set more realistic targets suited to their contexts. And separately, occupational sex segregation that we see, that's the data signifies, means that women cluster around certain occupations in utilities, administration, customer service, and are excluded from technical occupations. And that is overall costly and inefficient. On the next slide, another thing we learned is that on average, female employees, especially female engineers, leave utilities at a higher rate than men. So what becomes apparent is that while we tend to focus on hiring women, it's as important to focus our efforts on ensuring that women remain in their positions and grow into leadership roles. So how to join Equal AfWA benchmarking and who can join? So public and private utilities, service providers, but also water resource management agencies can join. Our focus is on low and middle income countries. Why would you participate? Well, there are benefits to undertaking this diagnosis. It allows utilities to establish a baseline, benchmark against other organizations in the region and globally, can help you inform business decisions and strategic action plans. And if the survey is repeated, it allows you to monitor progress over time. To initiate the process, please send us an email at equalaqua@worldbank.org, or you can contact me directly through the chat. Collecting data is often the first step to identify the key gender gaps in water institutions. So on the next slide, but we also know that to develop strategies for gender actions and to implement change, we have also a range of tools and didactic material to support practitioners in implementing diversity and inclusion in water institutions. And all of these tools and resources are publicly available. So for example, we have a free online self-paced course for utility managers that you can take. It takes about 3.5 hours, but you can take pieces of it. Videos, case studies, and as mentioned before, an excellent database of 180 examples that was put together with University of Technology, Sydney. So that's it from my side. We invite you to visit worldbank.org/equalaqua to learn more. And of course, please email us if you would like to get in touch. Thank you. Juliana, you are muted.
That was helpful. Thank you, Camila. So thank you for your presentation and thank you for keeping me sharp. Now we move on with the experiences with Equal AfWA's approach, and it brings us to Peru. Lucy Cardenas is the communication coordinator of the program for modernization of the water and sanitation service providers in Peru. Lucy has more than 20 years experience working in mass media, and she holds a master's degree in social communication. Lucy will share now her presentation, Experiences in the Search for Gender Equality in the Water Supply and Sanitation Utilities of Peru. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juliana. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. I have been invited to share our experiences in Peru with the implementation of the World Bank Gender Survey to promote gender inclusion in the Peruvian water supply and sanitation utilities. I am, as you said, the communication officer for the project implementing unit from the government's side. We form part of OTAS, which is a governmental governmental agency that provides technical support to 47 utilities in Peru. And we are working closely with the World Bank to implement water supply and sanitation's modernization project. Next slide, please. Why did we decide to implement the World Bank Gender Balance Surveys here in Peru? The World Bank's modernization program seeks to increase access to and quality of water and sanitation services, as well as improve efficiency of service providers. Water institutions and utilities often face an underrepresentation of the female workforce. There is evidence that this has a negative impact on performance and decision-making. Women are hired at lower rates, face retention hurdles, and often have fewer opportunities to advance in their careers. To promote inclusive workspaces and equal conditions for women within Peru's utilities, and following the guidelines of our ally, the World Bank, we took on the challenge of initiating a national investigation that would allow us to understand the status regarding gender balance in Peru's utilities. The World Bank's project team and Global Water Practice provided us with the gender balance survey in Spanish, and we disseminated this to 47 utilities spread over Peru. Next slide, please. How did we operationalize this? We conducted the following tasks to ensure responses. First, we made introductory calls and explanation of questionnaires, calls confirming receipt of questionnaires, and finally, calls to request the return of duly completed questionnaires, as well as responding to follow-up questions. The interest was overwhelming. We received 37 completed questionnaires, more than 77% of our total goal. These were forwarded to the World Bank team to be processed to show the results, who developed a scorecard for each utility, showing how they did in relation to fellow utilities and in relation to regional and global scores. Next slide. What did the results show? The gender balance survey showed that Peru has the lowest rate of promotion of women with respect to the regional and global index. Most water utilities do not have differentiated sanitary facilities, nor even lactation areas. Despite this, utilities do not have, the survey also revealed that a utility in Lima has the highest proportion of employees who are women about the country regional and global index. Good news. Also revealed that 3 EPS from Central, Northern, and Southern Peru have achieved gender equity at the level of engineers, well above the country, regional, and global index. Good news. Next slide, please. How did we disseminate results? To disseminate the results and continue fostering dialogue on the topic, we organized a virtual event called Female Water Warriors, Challenges and Opportunities for the Strengthening of Gender Equity in the Utilities of Peru. We invited the higher management teams of utility as well as general staff from all departments, besides showcasing the results of Peru versus regional and global research. It also allowed introducing tools and instruments available to utility staff. Next steps. Female managers expressed a strong interest in participating in this type of spaces where they feel the contribution of all workers of the utility is valued. In general, there is consensus that gender inequality is not a topic frequently discussed, as it is not internalized that greater equality in the workplace can result in better management and higher performance of the utility. We noted also that the male managers were surprised by the comparative results to see how much remained to be done in their utility. In general, the management team of the utilities applauded this initiative and regard the results of the survey as presented by the World Bank through a scorecard as a document to support the implementation of real changes. Some utilities, such as from Huaral, Moyobamba, and Mapavixa, now wish to develop action plans. Several EPS utilities managers have shown interest in joining the Equal Aqua platform, so they will be sent the registration questionnaires. As we move forward, we have recommended the bank's Equal Aqua team to translate more Equal Aqua tools into Spanish, so we can respond to the growing interest of utilities. We still have a long way to go in Peru to achieve gender balance in the water sector. Fomenting dialogue is the key. And the World Bank's gender survey proved in an excellent tool to do this. The Peruvian water sector looks forward to continue forming part of these global discussions, to continue learning and sharing experiences. Thanks for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for a very clear presentation and also very interesting. So now we move on with the final block of presentations related to the Organizational Inclusion Assessment Tool developed by Simavi. Our next speaker is Sara Arari, an Iranian Dutch trained as a civil engineer. Sara has more than 20 years of experience. During many of them, she worked on improving gender equality and inclusion in the WASH and development sector. In 2016, she developed and tested Simavi's inclusion assessment tools and regularly provided training on the topic. Since 2022, Sara is the team lead of the Environmental Risk Assessment team at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Juliana. It's wonderful to see many familiar and well, less familiar names on the webinar, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to still connect with my passion, which is the inclusion, diversity, and gender equality. I'm also happy to mention that my colleagues from Simavi, Patrick Zia and Juliana Kyo are also here on the call, and I think for future references they can also be consulted. Next. Yeah. Well, maybe before we get to the specific of the assessment tool that I will present today, it's good to give you some information about Simavi. Simavi is an NGO founded in 1925 in the Netherlands and currently working in 10 countries in Asia and Africa, and is currently a co-mentor in GWOPA project in Kenya called Pro-Poor Wash Access in Kenya, Reducing Inequalities Through Partnership. Is led by Kisimu Water and Sanitation Company. Next. So the tool was developed in 2016 through a program funded by the Dutch government called WASH Alliance program, which where different partners are involved in different countries, and we felt really that's well, we would like to measure better how we can also improve our inclusiveness. The tool and then the tool uses benchmarking under 8 different focus areas, and it's well, while it can be facilitated assessment, but it's very important that the organizations themselves do the assessment and then also make the relevant action plan. 5 different levels of the inclusion is considered, as you can see in the left side of the slide. Invisible awareness, invisible inclusion level, awareness level, intentional inclusion, strategic inclusion, and culture of inclusion. Next. How it can be used? It's very important that the organization sets aside time and if needed, financial resources to complete the assessment. Organization needs to appoint an inclusion focal point or a task force who would select a team of from different levels and different departments to fill in the inclusion assessment survey. And it is very important that this team that's selected as the respondent also especially includes those who might feel excluded. Preferably if the organization size is not too big, it's better that if everyone is asked to participate in the survey. And after all the respondents have filled in the survey, the focal points can draw the overall results based on the reported scores in the assessment summary section, which is one of the sheets in the Excel file that is part of the tool. Next, please. And the focal points need to present the results back to the organization, in particular those who were part of the survey and responded to it, and more importantly, the managers, so that they would be also aware of the results. Then either the task force or the whole group will choose 3 focus area which the organization wants to improve, and the task force will follow up with developing a action plan based on and the strategies to address those focus area. And this will be repeated to measure the progress on regular basis and making relevant adjustments. Next, please. And what we noticed that is also very important is to celebrate the successes by sharing the stories about how the organization has improved. Next, please. So what is included in this tool is there is the main survey, which is Excel sheets with different survey questions and some guidelines for the focal points and how to assess, how to make the final analyzation. There's a Word document or PDF which provides the guideline to the how to do the assessment. And there are recommendations for the strategies to improve organization inclusiveness, and also recommendation for action plans based on different focus areas. Next. So these 8 focus areas that I mentioned, which the survey focuses on, are leadership and accountability, commitment of resources, planning, implementation and measurements, services, citizen and community engagement, human resource policies and practices, employee engagement and education, and responses to incident. It is also important to know that the organization can also decide that they don't want to do the survey for all of this and all of these focus areas. So and choose, for instance, 5 of them to conduct the surveys, and then it's recommended that later on all of these focus areas will be assessed, but it can be also done gradually. Next, please. So to give you an idea of how it looks like, for instance, for the focus area of leadership and accountability, you have a Excel sheet that has different statements, and the participant on each row can use one of these statements, and as they do, next please. So you see that these little squares can be can be ticked, and as they tick them, there will be under a calculation of how many rows are on the on how many columns are, for instance, the first one on the gray one is the invisible part, so it will calculate how many of these squares have been for each column picked. Next, please. As I mentioned, it's based on the benchmarking. So we decided that it's the benchmark for having the it's 60%. So this what I had filled in, this was quite per chance and not very considering any specific organization, has led for the leadership and accountability. That's the benchmark is on intentional inclusion. If, for instance, the number of the invisible or awareness are more, probably the color which is there is more yellow, and then you could say that for that specific focus area, the organization is on that level. So it's on the, for instance, awareness, or if there are more of the strategic inclusion are ticked, then the diagram would shift, and then the blue one would be on the 60%, and then that's at that for that focal focus area, the organization would be at that moment on the strategic inclusion. So it's good to see that is a moment in the during the journey of the organization in inclusion. Next, please. Yeah, so there are some links for that you can have access to these files. As I mentioned, my colleague Patrick and Juliana are working at the moment also with these tools in Kenya. So I would be happy if anyone has questions, but as Patrick and Juliana are continuing to work on that, maybe it's better also if you have if you want to exchange information to also reach out to them. Thank you very much. I would be happy to answer any questions needed.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your interesting presentation. We will move on now with the last presentation on the experiences with the organizational inclusion assessment tool, and will be given by Hadi Toure. Hadi is a staff member of SOMAGEP, a large water utility in Mali. She currently works in the drinking water distribution department. In addition, Hadi is a member of the executive board of the Association of Young Water and Sanitation Professionals. She holds a master's degree in water and environmental engineering. Hadi, the floor is yours.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Hadi Toure. I am a utility engineer at SOMAGEP in Mali, and today I will discuss about diagnosing gender diversity and inclusion at the Malian water utility. Next slide, please. So there are 4 categories of organizations that represent different social groups in our utility. We have AFSO, which is the Association of the Women of SOMAGEP. We have REMAFPEA, the women network affiliated with AfWA, African Water Association. This network is extended to non-utility workers, of course. We have the unions, which represent the employees of SOMAGEP, and in our utility, we have 2 different unions. And then we have AJPA, which is the Young Water and Sanitation Professionals Network in Mali. Next slide, please. So in the beginning of our water operator partnership called the Waterworks program between SOMAGEP and World WaterNet, which is our Amsterdam counterpart, a baseline assessment for social inclusion was conducted. The tool we used was presented to us by the Waterworks program and developed by Simavi. We focused on 7 areas with 5 different levels of inclusion, just as was presented earlier. The questions for the assessments were answered by the Waterworks gender team, and this team was composed of female members of each project work package, and there were 2 different focus groups. Next slide. So this is the result of the assessment. Out of the 5 levels of inclusion, our utility scored intentional inclusion, but the company still has to make efforts in being inclusive, especially with its planning and implementation. Next slide. It was interesting to compare these assessment results with the UN Women Gender Certification Evaluation that was initiated by the SOMAGEP Women Association in the utility. And UN Women made a comparison with other companies, not only utilities, and provided recommendations that were used together with the assessment of the Waterworks project. And we made a common action plan for gender and social inclusion after all these assessments. We can conclude that the pressing recommendation from all our work was to institutionalize gender and diversity within our utility. Next slide. So the results of the diagnosis activities were conducted were disseminated during the Waterworks session during the masterclass on female leadership in April 2019. This was organized by the REMAFPA, which is the AfWA affiliated women network. And this masterclass hosted 37 women from East, West, Northern Africa, and they were hosted in Mali. Next slide. So from this exercise, we've learned that time needs to be spent on the translation and contextualization of the tools. Mali is a French-speaking country, so we had to translate the tools from English to French. Different utility processes need to be well represented in the focus groups. Appropriate trainings should be done on the use of the tools, and management should be involved since the beginning of the process. Next. So today, we can still observe significant advancements since the beginning of our water operator partnership. The first female director in the company's history was appointed and is a member of the SOMAGEP Women Network and the AfWA affiliated REMAFPA network. The REMAFPA Women Network earned recognition at the AfWA 2020 Congress. Our water operator partnership was a winner in social inclusion in 2022 during the Waterworks gathering in Amsterdam. We received a special recognition for good social inclusion practices from GWOPA Congress in 2021. And our WAP, our water operator partnership, supports the young professionals, both financially and in kind. Aside from seeing a rise in its female members in the executive board, we're now 29% in AJPA, women and young professionals. We were able to manage a project, an 8-month capacity building training and mentorship for women in water and sanitation called SUFESEA. And this project was funded by NUFIC and the Waterworks program. In conclusion, I think social inclusion is all about intergenerational empowerment, empathy, and active listening and acknowledgement of every single individual. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. You're muted, Juliana.
Again, thank you. And thank you, Annie, for sharing your experience with us. Apologies if we are slightly delayed. And also a note for the participants of the EU WOP workshop that will take place right after this. We may accumulate a slight delay of 10 minutes, so we will start 10 minutes later, the workshop as well. So for now, we have planned the Q&A session, and I will hand over to Sika Radilova. She's the Senior Project Officer at the International Water Association. Sika is a diversity, equality, and inclusion expert. She works with the private and public sector, NGOs, and European institutions. She holds an MA degree in Social Anthropology of Development from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. So Sika, I'm so sorry that the Q&A got shrunk, but maybe we can just ask one question and then we will proceed to wrap it up. Over to you, Sika.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you and thank you, Juliana. I know that we are very short on time and I have a list of few questions, but as I know that we don't have time for more than that, I think I'm just gonna ask one generic question that I have on record that could be either answered by any of our panelists, whoever feels like have insight on that. Doesn't matter if it's to developer or a user. My question is regarding the importance of reassessing periodically. How do we move from theory to practice? And how often should utility perform again a diagnosis of their DGI practices? Any of our panelists that is happy to answer this question?
I'm happy to answer in the chat if there's not time, but perhaps shall I answer briefly, Sika, from an engendering industries program perspective? So just to say, in terms of how often one should reassess, we do, with the rapid organizational assessment, we do it at the outset of a program, and 6 months to a year later, we do what we call the end line assessment. So how do the results differ from the beginning to the end? In terms of how to move from theory to practice, I think the analysis, the data evidence is what then informs the development of a detailed action plan. And you saw that with Faustina and with Letitia in terms of this is the action we want to take based on a best practice. This is the time frame. This is what we'll measure to see how effective we've been. So that would be from our experience. I don't know whether others want to comment as well.
Thank you, Kirsten. Does anybody else wants to join? For example, maybe Camila or Sarah for a quick answer?
Sure, I'm happy to come in. I think it really depends. I really liked Hadi's slide on context matters. I think it's true. I mean, for someone, it may make sense for a utility to review every year, look at the data and monitor every 2 years. I mean, it really depends. I think as long as we do this regularly, from the point of view of Equal AfWA, where we work with many utilities, we just encourage to conduct assessments on a regular basis so that we can really see what works and what doesn't. And I would just call for more effort on monitoring what works and looking at impact evaluations and looking at really making sure we invest resources into activities that have been proven to work. Although again, context matters. So I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camila. And Sarah, would you like to add something quickly before I hand back to Juliana?
Well, I do agree with what was said. I think it's very much, for instance, with the tool that we use, there are some focus areas that you have some low-hanging fruit. So like a small change in human resource policies can make a huge difference. But then the areas that has to do more with the change of behavior and change of mindset, those take longer time. So it also very much depends on what you are measuring. But I think yearly assessments and in most cases might be would be beneficial to see where you are going.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Juliana, let me know if we have time for any more questions, or shall I hand back to you for closing the webinar?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have to close. I was just checking if I was muted again. We have to close, and I'm sorry, Sika, for shrinking your part, but thank you so much for the moderation. So I would like to just close with a few remarks. First of all, I would like to thank the audience for showing up for such an important topic. I would like to thank all the speakers for their availability to share their knowledge and experience. And then lastly, the colleagues at GWOPA that collaborated in the organization of the webinar. Also, I would like to inform you that GWOPA's efforts in the field of gender, diversity and inclusion will continue. In particular, a session will take place at the 5th Global WOPS Congress that will be held in Bonn on the 22nd until the 25th of May 2023. So we invite you to attend to the Congress in person, but hopefully the session will take place in a hybrid format so that people that cannot attend the conference can connect remotely.